Now we're on for another exciting panel, and this one is going to be especially dear to my heart because I'm all about addressing the climate crisis and what we can do at a state, local, and national level. So let's go ahead. Is it Igor, are you going to start us out?
I think it's probably going to be Wietske or Mark.
Oh, right. Mark is our speaker for this. Let's see, Mark. Let's get him unmuted.
Yes, I think I'm going to be master of ceremonies for this round. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, that's good. All right. So I must say the panels have been fantastic for the People's Assembly, have been really amazing. The last one about foreign policy, extraordinary. So all through, since the primary, there hasn't been any discussions about foreign policy whatsoever. And we're going to be electing the commander-in-chief. This is rather extraordinary that corporate mainstream media has not asked a single question about foreign policy. And we all know that Trump's foreign policy is completely incoherent, but Biden's foreign policy has been distinctly, determinately imperialistic his entire career. So I don't know what the foreign policy of Kamala Harris is. These are questions that we must be asking, and I'm pleased that it was being asked in these panels. There's a general feeling of sadness that I felt with a lot of the Bernie delegates here. And I must say to everybody, California Bernie-crats, we won California. Bernie won California. We won California by over 300,000 votes. And we did that. All of us here, we did this. And that means Medicare for All wins California. That means the Green New Deal wins California. That means getting rid of student debt wins California. That means ending the wars wins California. So when you go back, whatever district that we're in, know that you have that power. Believe me, elected officials notice that. They notice that. So have that, put some wind in your sails. But this movement does not end with the California primary, of course. And the question has been constantly, where do we go from here? That's been the question. The answer is we don't go anywhere. We put our stake in our land, we put a line in the sand, and we make sure that everyone knows what our demands are, that we are not going to be moving until we get what we want, until we get what the people need. So that is the spirit we need to take for all these issues. And just real quick, before we get into the Green New Deal, I want to thank all of the delegates who affirmed and reaffirmed that healthcare is a human right by rejecting the current DNC platform that does not include Medicare for All. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for making that stance. And I know it was not easy because I know a lot of you worked hard on certain planks in the platform that were very important, But there is no middle ground when it comes to a human right. And we shouldn't let the party play games with that. There is no middle ground for a human right. And so this public option apartheid system that they are trying to get us enthusiastic about, keep rejecting it. And I know everyone here in this movement and who's been part of the People's Assembly, they understand that that one of the things I've learned in politics is that every issue is connected to every other issue. And so you cannot talk about the climate crisis without talking about ending militarism. And you cannot talk about healthcare without talking about housing. That you cannot talk about education without talking about living wages. And you can't talk about climate justice without talking about racial justice. And we are in this paradigm right now. Essentially, it's billionaires versus human beings. And so thankfully, all the people here are on the side of human beings. Okay, so I think my co-host, Michelle, if she is here, I'd love to turn it over to her, who is going to be talking to the first of three very remarkable candidates. And I think Michelle, if she is here, go ahead and give me the crossover cue. Well, I can vamp in the meantime. I'll vamp in the meantime if necessary. So we're talking about the Green New Deal now because we do not have a champion of the Green New Deal on the federal level right now. With the suspension of Bernie Sanders, so we have to fight for it on the local level. And we have no choice. We're running out of time. In fact, it's already too late. This is the sort of urgency that we need to take on about this task. And we are entering a dangerous era of climate collapse, where we're going to be seeing wildfires, drought, record-breaking heat waves. We're going to see flooding. Right now in Northern California, there is a fire tornado ravaging the land. This is the kind of peculiarities of Dante's Inferno that we're going to be seeing. And the time is now. The time is now to force the issue of a Green New Deal on the local level, on the state level, because the longer we wait, the harder it is to address this challenge. So, and on the local level, there is a lot of opportunities. There's, Lauren, go ahead and give me the cue if Michelle
here.
She's
Thank
here.
you. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you so much, Mark, for introducing us. Today, we're going to be talking with some amazing activists and candidates who are no longer waiting for national action and who are working to achieve the Green New Deal on local levels. So first up is Fatima Iqbal-Zubair, who's running for State Assembly in AD 64. If we can please unmute her, that would be lovely. She's on here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Fatima, for joining us. So Fatima is running for State Assembly for so many reasons that we'll jump into. So can you just start off by giving us a background on why you're running and just about your district, since a lot of us might not be familiar?
I would love to. Do I have capabilities to share my screen? Can I share my screen?
You do.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, I'm going to do that if you guys can all bear with me. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Amazing. All right. Yes, of course, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's so great that you all are doing this. We really have to, you know, obviously we can't rely on the party. So, you know, it's all of us that really has to fight, stay on the streets, vote for the right candidates, and just keep this movement going. So yeah, a little bit about my race and AD 64. As you can see in this picture here, I am a public school teacher. I work in Watts. I'm an immigrant. Immigrated from Dubai to Canada, where I lived in the first province that achieved Medicare for all. So it's been a big part of why, you know, it's just something that I reflect on a lot, moving from there to the US then, and seeing just like people actually talking about healthcare in Canada. It wasn't like that. And I'm a mother to a son with special needs who has autism. So all those three things are very important to me. A little bit about my district. So I know we have folks here from all over California. As you can see here, my district is really a lot of South LA, a little bit of the South Bay. So Carson, Compton, Willowbrook, Rancho Dominguez, Wilmington, and North Long Beach, North Harbor Gateway, a little bit of Gardena, and Watts. I've been endorsed by DSA LA, DSA Long Beach, Our Revolution National, Sunrise Movement, among other organizations. Michelle can post my website one more time so you guys can kind of check out a little bit about me. Basically, we're going to talk a lot about my race. Michelle, should I just go into like why I decided to run? I know that was like the next question.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll go right into it then. Yeah. So why am I running? It's not just, it's nothing like, it's not opportunistic for me or anything like that. My fight is really, let me go to the next slide. Okay. So my fight is really, really stemmed from being a public school teacher in Watts and really seeing my students and what they were going through. So I worked in a school that didn't have clean water. I started teaching in Watts actually around the time when Bernie started his first campaign. And so going through that and going through the Trump's election, right, it really gave context while I was teaching there. That was a big kind of part of it. But I worked in a school where my kids didn't have clean water. They were by a toxic recycling facility for decades. Their football field had lead and arsenic toxicity. A lot of them lived in the projects, and the project was built on this old steel factory after World War II. Of course, in marginalized communities, the environmental codes are not followed. So basically, Watts has the lowest life expectancy in all of LA County. And based on what I'm telling you about my school, it's by no surprise. This is systemic racism. It is environmental racism. And so that's where my fight really started. At first, I told myself that I would, you know, really like, you know, be in the classroom. I was science, department chair science teacher. I taught environmental science, chemistry, and I brought a robotics team to Watts. And I told myself, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm teaching science, yes, but everything was in a cultural context. I talked about eugenics. I talked about environmental racism. I talked about a lot of issues because I knew my students had a lot to fight against, and the world would be stacked against them. And I never lied to them about that. I mean, and you know, so I told myself I'm going to create an army of like fighters and advocates. But learning about these issues, knowing that it's a lot more systemic in nature, I felt like it wasn't enough for me just to be a teacher. And even though I love teachers, I don't mean it that way. I meant I felt like my fight could be spent in these larger places of power, right? Bring the house back to the people. And a large part of this was when I started doing environmental advocacy in Watts outside of the classroom. I would always try to bring my students' experiences, you know, rather connect them to their community, right? Because that's where real teaching happens. And that's where I kind of found myself in these spaces where the community was working with the city. I saw an extreme distrust, you know, just a disillusionment with the city officials. They would be doing community engagement after like these housing deals were made. They would be, you know, bringing in, you know, trees and all these things that seemingly were positive, but not really getting community engagement as to what they really wanted, where they really wanted changes to occur. So, and then I got inspired to, you know, let me go check out my assemblyman. My district is very blue, and so I was like, let me try to find you know, get close to who's in power right now, and that's where I kind of found out about Mike Gibson and how awful his record is. We're going to go into a lot of this. So I want to wait for maybe Michelle's. Well, let me talk a little bit about this slide, and then I'll wait Michelle to ask kind of the next question. But so this is like my district. So a little bit about my district, and then we can go into some of the other questions. So as I mentioned, my district is, you know the areas, it's 90% people of color. Here's why I'm so excited to be on this panel. So my district is one of the most environmentally impacted districts in California. There's 80 assembly districts. I'm in District 64. It has over 25% of California's refineries, right? So I want you to think about that. 80 assembly districts, over a quarter of California's refineries are concentrated in my district. It has the highest rate of neighborhood oil drilling anywhere in LA County. It has the largest refinery on the West Coast, which is Marathon Refinery in my district. So there's a lot of environmental issues in here. You could look at, I know I've had the slide up, so for sake of going to the next question, I mean, you could look at the systemic nature of the issues, educational attainment. Only half of my district has high school degrees and 11.7% have college degrees. It's the 5th lowest median income in California. And surprise, surprise, is 90% people of color. This is not by accident. Our system is inherently built to be racist in classes. So the good news is though, is that, actually I'll wait for that slide. Michelle, I wanna go to the next question?
Yes, I wanted to hear about your vision for a Green New Deal in your community and in the state.
Yes, so great question. One thing I did want to mention when I was doing my intro is that I'd actually be the first Muslim ever elected to the state legislature. I'd be the first Sri Lankan and the first woman to represent my district in over 100 years of assembly history. So I think that's pretty cool as well. Yeah, definitely happy to talk about my vision. Let me go down here to just make sure I list everything. So right now, right in our state legislature, it is such a joke that we have a Democratic legislature because there are so many things we're doing wrong in terms of the environment. The great part is, just to make sure everyone understands this, is that, you know, the media always focuses on Trump, on Betsy DeVos, on, you know, Mitch McConnell, and all these environmental regulations that are being reversed. But there's actually a lot of control we have at the state level, right? But we are not doing enough. For example, a recent bill, AB 345, didn't pass because of, you know, some awful senators. But honestly, in the assembly, even though it passed, I want you all to know that 29 Democrats voted absent or never on that bill, including my opponent. SB 625 is another important bill, and feel free to post links here. I know a lot of you guys know about these bills, which is trying to privatize water. So, and also we've increased fracking under Gavin Newsom. Just want you all to know that we're not doing, not only are we not doing enough, we're actually going backwards in a lot of environmental issues. What the vision I have for the state is that, you know, we need to achieve net zero. We need a movement that addresses this crisis with the urgency that it deserves. And there's no one really there right now doing that. Assemblymember Bonta had a Green New Deal bill, but it is not good at all. It is not good at all. It doesn't address marginalized communities. It is not holistic or comprehensive. So we need to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2030. We need to have a just economic transition. This means we need to work with urban planners, you know, at the state level. We need to understand that housing is also an environmental justice issue. Build sustainable housing, build housing near to where people work, right? This is a history that's very intersectional. Cleaning up hazardous chemicals and abandoned sites, banning fracking and oil and natural gas drilling. In my district in Wilmington, particularly, I mean, there's drilling happening next to babies' homes and kids' homes. This is ridiculous. Making public transit free is also really important. And just enforcing the air and water quality policies we have. I always hear at the local level that we have these policies that are passed to the state level that simply aren't enforced. And it's ironic that one of the people on the board of the air quality is actually, you know, Gibson staffer, right? These are the people on these regulatory boards. It's very corrupt. And we need to expand green spaces. Yeah, so that's my vision. We have to start now. I mean, we're already behind and it's very urgent. So Michelle, that's next question.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss with you like how these issues intersect of like environmental racism in your community and like COVID-19, because a lot of the air quality issues, you know, they're related.
Yes, very, very good question. Yeah, so as I mentioned, kind of like with the slide I had here, these are very intersectional issues. Our system is not broken. It was meant to be this way, right? I just want to start with that. If we look at who's getting sick from COVID, right? It is the Latino community. It is the Black community. It is also the Filipino community. We don't talk about that community, but they're the third most affected in our state. And the Filipino community is also just like, you know, the past two communities I mentioned, a lot of them are essential workers. And it's not by accident that they're with jobs that aren't able to be unionized, so they don't have healthcare. It's, you know, so that's a big factor, right? Not only do they live near where sites are more polluted, they also don't have access to healthcare, which is why Medicare for All is so important. And also they don't have, you know, good schools, and they don't have a lot of my district has 4 times the eviction rate of LA County. So a lot of these folks are housing burdened or homeless. And so these are issues that are definitely intersectional that are making them more likely to get sick from COVID, which is what we're seeing in the statistics.
Thank you, Fatima. I think we're just maybe going to ask one more question and jump on to the next candidate. Let's see. Oh yeah, how do you approach the people in your community who are very reliant on the refineries for a job, and then you come, you know, talking about the Green New Deal? How do you talk to them?
Yeah. I will. And I want to just quickly plug in also my opponent a little bit in this question. Michelle, if you could post my links, that way people have time to kind of look at them. I want to just say a couple more things that will take like 30 seconds. My district actually voted Bernie, so it's very progressive. Gibson, who represents it right now, is the second biggest corporate acceptor of money. I already talked about a lot of this. He's number one in getting gifts. He also has a really bad environmental record. So I want you guys to definitely look up his courage score, which is pretty bad. Here are some of the bills he's voted no or absent on. This is just touching the surface though of what he voted no or absent on. All right, so I want to just address Michelle's question now, really important. So Gibson is pretty bad basically. He's gotten the most in gifts, for example, from all these oil companies. He's a former cop, takes a lot of cop money as well. Yeah, so how do we approach a just transition, right? So it takes extensive planning, which is why it makes me really nervous, because this should have happened. The planning itself could take a year or 2 years, and this should have happened like 15 years ago, right? Or more, and it hasn't. So we have to work with urban planners, we have to work with unions, we have to work with those in housing justice experts to figure out, because the Green New Deal is an intersectional issue, right? It's about changing the landscape of our state. So one thing I want to really shout out is the LA City Council, as awful as they are, is that they approve I believe last year, the ELAN project, right, which didn't pass first, but when they worked with the unions and when they really made sure certain things were guaranteed for workers, it did pass. So we need to do something like that at the state level. We have to really make sure we work with our unions, make sure that any new jobs we create are unionized, make sure that when we aren't, we aren't taking away someone's paycheck, which is why we need to plan for this in advance. We need to make sure training is given, that people are paid for this training and they don't have to use their own money for it, and make sure we work with unions and work with housing justice experts. Everyone has to be at the table to make sure that we can really change our grid in California.
Thank you so much for your time, Fatima, and for joining us. Up next, we have Jake Tonkel, candidate for San Jose City Council, who will be interviewed by Mark.
Very good. Thank you, Fatima. So from District 64, which has the most oil production in the world, to Silicon Valley, which is the new Wall Street. It is the generator of inequality, particularly here on the West Coast. And with massive amounts of money being produced and made in Silicon Valley, it creates a crisis of housing, a crisis of monopoly, a crisis of privacy. And the paradox is that the Silicon Valley also produces some of our most progressive leaders, like Congressman Ro Khanna, Assemblyman Ash Kalra. So in this supposed hub of innovation and new thinking solutions, what opportunities does your race have? And I'm going to ask this to Jake. What opportunities does your race have? Tell us about what's at stake at in your race, and tell us about how we can leverage it for environmental policy that will save us all. Jake.
I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you, Lauren, who is a District 6 resident, will hopefully be voting for me in November, for bringing me on. City of San Jose is absolutely at stake right now. We are at a transition point in the city. As you mentioned, we have some incredibly progressive legislature, representatives, state, federal. At the city level, we lose almost every progressive battle 6-5. It's really, really unfortunate when we talk about rent control, when we talk about weakening or strengthening the Ellis Act, when we talk about whether we give rent relief to people across the city, whether we're going to implement a community choice energy program. We're losing battles 6-5 left and right, and literally giving tens of millions of dollars away to developers that are profiting off of the inequality that we've created to create more luxury housing. City of San Jose is the bedroom community of Silicon Valley. It's the only major city where more people commute out during the day than commute in. And for those of us that are kind of acutely aware to how cities generate revenue, it is not healthy in terms of our traditional structure, which means all city council has had to do, if they subscribe to a trickle-down housing theory and this corporatist mantra, is let's bring in more corporations and bring in more jobs without any understanding of the repercussions for gentrification and displacement that ends up bringing to our community. The challenge we face across Silicon Valley, one of the most unequal places on earth, is how do we create micro communities that are safe and healthy and socioeconomically diverse. City of San Jose is kind of the poster child for that inequity. We have 4 low-income jobs in the city of San Jose for every 1 housing unit affordable to those families, which means when we continue to build luxury housing, we met almost 94% of our 2023 goal for luxury market rate housing and 7% of our affordable housing goal. We are creating a city that is just for rich tech people at the end of the day. And that's what's at stake. As we move forward, my district has a particularly interesting role. So I am from the west side of San Jose, Silicon Valley. It is the hub of wealth. Our battle in the city is an east-west divide. Part of that is simply because pollution from old mercury refining factories and mining operations, as Silicon Valley was getting its start, all the wind blew all that pollution on the east side and made the land less valuable. And so all the wealthy people settle on the west side. Being from the west side, I have left and come back. I'm originally an engineer. I've spent time in Morocco as a Peace Corps volunteer, and through kind of that experience of leaving, watching the United States unfold in the 2016 election while I was abroad, and coming back, really understanding that it's our white privilege that we have to start to battle on this side of the city to make real progressive change. When we flip this seat, right now it's held by someone who was an incumbent 4 years ago, conservative Republican, who chose to stop identifying with the Republican Party. We face a challenge. How do we connect with voters and tell them about progressive policy when everybody in the Bay Area is a Democrat? And going out, that means talking about a Green New Deal. Because when you're on the west side of a city that's wealthy, what people want to know, what constituents want to know is, how often are police going to patrol their neighborhood? When are you going to fix the pothole outside their driveway and make sure that that street light is fixed? And our messages, just like every message that comes from a progressive value, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can address our systemic inequality, address our climate crisis, and create quality city services at the same time. And that's really what's at stake here.
So I know your area a little bit, and it's a little bit more conservative than you would think looking from the outside. I'm wondering, how do you message these progressive policies? You touched on it a little bit, but for things like a Green New Deal, a local Green New Deal, what's your tactic?
Tactic is to talk about dollars. Unfortunately or fortunately, the Green New Deal saves us a ton of money. I mean, it is in a long-term scheme of a 10,000 economic view, billions of dollars for our community that we are not going to have to spend on rebuilding after floods or fires. When we have people that can live close to where they work, we have to repair our roads less often, which means more and more funds become available for those city services that people really want to see their tax dollars addressing when they're in a place of privilege or in a place of comfort, and think that they want to focus on that. Our own climate smart San Jose plan, which only set its goals at the Paris Climate Accords, 2 degrees Celsius, which most of us know is not good enough. We're not on a path to meeting our own city's climate smart goals anyway, but that plan, if met, saves the city $5 billion. We have $1 billion budget, $5 billion over the next 30 years. That's a message to go into a community and say, not only am I going to address the issues that are pressing on a local level, find more money for us, but we're going to address the issues and be a leader on the national stage as well. It's worked really well. You get a couple of people, obviously, that say, that sounds awfully like a Green New Deal, you socialist, and then they close the door on you. But most people are incredibly receptive to listening to the data that's backed by this type of policy.
Jake, you're extremely impressive. You have the endorsement of Igor Tregub, and that's enough of an endorsement for me. I guess the final question is, when you are elected to San Jose City Council, will you be pushing for a Green Economic Recovery Act for the city?
We can't do anything else. I mean, that has to be the focus, right? Igor and I he brought me on last year, I think. It's been years gone by really fast. We're talking about public banking, AB 857, as a way for local governments to start to spur their own funding for this type of Green New Deal, right? We don't, at a municipal level, you don't have the capacity to run deficits, and being able to tap into a banking market opens up billions of dollars for us to make investments in our community. And that same kind of investment needs to happen on a green recovery. When we're talking about equity, Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County has been one of the hardest hit in terms of COVID, deaths and cases. We were the first in the country to shut down as a county, and one of the last to kind of start this reopening. Families, literally 43,000 families are expected to face homelessness and eviction if we don't extend our eviction moratorium, because there are tens of thousands of dollars in back rent. We can't leave people behind. It's not only morally unacceptable, but it's just going to cost us more money in the long run to get our economy up and running again if we don't implement a green recovery.
Jake, I'm so pleased. Thank you so much for mentioning public banks. The movement for a Green New Deal is intertwined with the movement for public banks. So one last question. Tell us, what's the age of your opponent?
I think she is 44, and I'm 29 for everybody out there.
I cannot wait for your generation to take over. I cannot wait for this political class, this older generations to be swept out. So Jake, best of luck to you. You are extraordinarily impressive, as I said before. Thank you for joining us with this panel.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and good luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mark.
Jake Tonkel, San Jose City Council, support him. All go to San Jose, get all your friends in San Jose to support Jake. Thank you, Jake. Okay, so the next person that we're going to talk to is someone I first met. She was an organizer at ACE, the Alliance for Californians for Community Empowerment. She is a Bernie delegate, both in 2016 and this year. She is co-founder of Moms for Housing, and the term community leader is thrown around a lot, but she truly is a community leader. And more than that, she is a great nurturer of future leaders. And that's the sign of what a great leader is. In fact, to me, she is the living embodiment of not me, us. She is running for Oakland City Council, District 3. Please welcome the one, the only, Carol Fife. Carol.
You make me blush, Mark. You make me blush. So
Carol,
yes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for joining us. Carol, I'm just going to give you the floor. Tell us about your race. Tell us what's at stake. Tell us the opportunities for a local Green New Deal with your office. Go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Well, I'll say like my dear sister, Nina Turner, what's at stake? Only everything that we love is on the line. So that is locally, statewide, nationally, and globally. And the bad actors that are doing the most dirt to our environment are the same actors that are undermining our housing infrastructure. I'll just say really quickly, and then I'll talk a little bit about myself, is Stephen Schwarzman, the CEO of Blackstone Group, the multi-billionaire that was responsible for buying up multitudes of the housing stock after the foreclosure crisis, is also one of the biggest polluters of the Amazon, responsible for building this highway and causing this huge fire that happened in 2019 in the Amazon based on deforestation and the work and the destruction that his company and his subsidiaries are engaged in South America. So I want to stress that all of our fights are intersectional, all of them. Housing justice, environmental justice is racial justice. And that is one of the reasons that I'm running for city council right now, because everything that we've been fighting for in terms of teachers standing up, and going on strike because they are fed up with the conditions in public schools. Defunding our police departments so that we can invest that money into life-saving and life-affirming services. Housing, making housing a human right, giving access to PPEs to our frontline healthcare workers who are fighting just to save other people's lives. All of the things that I've been advocating for and working for and organizing for over the last 10 years are gaining public consciousness and acceptance when they used to be thought of as radical. So as I said before, and I'll say it again, and all my folks say, what was once considered radical is now rational. And the people that are not activists, that are not used to doing what we do, are standing up and demanding more. So because of those reasons, I am a vessel. Talk about not me, us. I am a vessel of the concerns of my constituency, of my friends, of my family, of my neighbors, to make sure that we have a representative in elected office that is not a Democrat in name only or a progressive in name only, but in deed, because that is what's going to help us through these times and these transformational times that we're living in right now. I feel like I'm going on a tangent. I'm getting fired up right now.
No, keep going, Carol.
This is the energy we need beyond Bernie. But I'll just say in the city of Oakland right now, we have major polluters like the ABNI foundry that is putting out toxic fumes into the environment that is exacerbating the existing challenges of COVID. We have ABNI foundry, we have the crematoriums in East Oakland, we have the coal that's being transported through the Port of Oakland, and all of these different pollutants that are also major contributors to Democratic candidates. So we've got to be able to have the difference to show people, just because you say you're a Democrat, you cannot accept money and consider yourself to be a progressive in these fights. Our lives are literally on the line. So I am running, and my district covers West Oakland, where a lot of these flatlands disparities that are causing premature death and a 10-year lifespan difference between people who live in my district and people who live in the hills is what's also one of the reasons why I think it's so critical to run right now, because the incumbent was supportive of transporting coal through this district, changed her mind and told people that that wasn't the case, but that was absolutely the case. So I'm running not only for a Green New Deal, but I'm also running for a Black New Deal, because when we actually transition and we go through a just transition to removing these toxic polluters from our city, we have to be able to replace the jobs that people have in those spaces so that they're not further traumatized economically. They need to have access to living wage work. They need to have job skills training to be employed in a green economy. And we need to tax all of these bad actors until we actually are able to shut them down. We need to tax them so that they are the ones paying for this new infrastructure redevelopment and the training of the workers who will need to be supported in this just transition. And I'm going to stop there for now.
Oh. So tell me, Carol, so your campaign has electrified the activist community of the East Bay. And but it's still a tough district in many ways. It's, in my experience, it's conservative, church going. A lot of the older voters are the ones that are most committed to voting. Tell me how you're going to win.
Well, I have a little secret that there are a lot of East Bay DSA folks who live in my district. The reality is things have changed over the years. The demographics, looking at the numbers, because I'm an organizer and I do door-to-door and field campaigning every single day of the year through the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the demographics, and it shifted. It is solidly democratic, but it is also based on polls that we've done and text banking that we've done. People want to see a change. People want to see defunding of the police department. Ironically enough, we're getting thousands of people saying, what are you going to do to defund the police department and invest that money into community? We're seeing people who are concerned about the particulate matter that blankets vehicles like that are just parked out in the public every day. People want to see a change, and this administration has done nothing to make people feel better about their lives every day. And because COVID has ravaged the district, people are also asking questions like, what is this administration going to do to make sure that people are okay? And there's no evidence that there's any leadership on that front. So people are, I see my window signs all over the district. I've outraised the incumbent in a short amount of time. I have over 300 volunteers. I have 76 precinct captains. I have a fully engaged data processing system where we're reaching voters on a daily basis. And I was able to raise $3,000 just yesterday. So I am viable. I have deep roots, 20 plus years in the community. People know me, they trust me because I'm out here in the trenches with them.
Yes.
And even though it is a tough district, with an incumbent, ranked choice voting will be an assistance in this particular race. And I'm looking forward to the fight, and I'm looking forward to the win.
And I am looking forward to the win as well. When Carol Fife wins, the people win. And so thank you, Carol. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
can just say for all of these candidates, every one of their wins is a win for all of us, no matter where you are in California. And Carol Fife, her district in Oakland. Oakland is where social movements are born.
That's right.
And this is, the time is right for Carol Fife, for real. The time is right for her. And let's make it happen. Carol, thank you so much. Thank you as always. Carol, I know we're friends, but I wanted to say this. I've never said this to you before. I'm also a fan. So.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol
Love
Fife.
y'all. Thank you.
So next we're going to go to an activist who is always active. In fact, he's doing 8,000 things all at once. I don't know how he does it. He was elected to the Berkeley Rent Board. He was endorsed by Gus Newport and endorsed by a certain Senator Bernie Sanders in 2017, I think it was. He is a DNC delegate and a DNC climate change task force advisor, if I got that correctly. I'm going to turn it over to our very good friend who is going to tell us about the good news about the DNC platform as it relates to climate change and climate policy. And he's also going to tell us, he's going to bring it to the local level. He's going to talk to us about the Berkeley Climate Action Fund, which is going to soon be on the ballot. He is our very good friend, Igor Tregub. Igor.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just have to say, it's always very humbling to speak right after Carol Fife, Sister Carol. You're amazing, and I'm fired up to support you and all the Bernie-crats running the cycle. So I'm delighted to tell you about the DNC platform. And the reason I'm delighted to tell you about the DNC platform is to put it in a structural context of, I joined the nearly 1,000 other delegates to cast my vote against the platform as a solidarity measure, because I found it to be appalling that Medicare for all, its inclusion into the platform, was voted down. And I could not in good conscience support a platform that did not include Medicare for all. However, that being said, I think at least on the climate, the platform, while it doesn't include everything that we fought for, it is the strongest platform that the DNC has ever had. And it is far stronger than what it started out to be in draft form. Now, a lot of it, I have to thank AOC and her leadership and the leadership of many others as part of the joint Biden-Sanders Climate Task Force. But I also have to thank the leadership of not me, us, the delegates and the subject matter experts, advisors that collectively pushed the platform in a stronger direction on every issue, and including this issue as well. I'm going to take you back. How we even came to this point was almost a year ago to the day when I remember coming to a packed convention in San Francisco where the DNC had its meeting. I don't think the DNC leadership expected the number of young people in particular and activists from all around the country that packed the halls, and they actually didn't know what to do with them. So they locked the doors, and it took a concerted 5-minute standoff with the DNC leadership. Tell them, what the heck are you doing? This is supposed to be the party of sunlight. Let the people in. This is the people's party. So then they opened the doors, and sunrise was able to come in. Activists were able to pack the halls even more. And what was the reason for all of this? Why were people so driven to be on the convention floor? It had to do with the fact that we wanted to support a resolution that one of the Democratic debates this cycle would be around climate change. It only is the existential issue of our time. Why the hell not? Unfortunately, as you all know, that did not come to pass ultimately. Fortunately, what came of it is activists were ready to continue getting organized and continue the movement. And so we did that. One individual that deserves a lot of credit for this is Michelle Dietrich. Michelle is a Bernie pledged DNC delegate out of Michigan, and she started a committee or task force on the climate crisis. And that task force released a 10-page platform or 10-page set of platform recommendations that used Green New Deal concepts to center how we talk about racial equity, racial justice, environmental leadership, and people-centered leadership. And in fact, so after we released it, with the input of hundreds of groups, including, I mean, it was everyone from Sunrise to the Sierra Club, the California Young Democrats that I'm a part of was an early endorser, which I'm very proud of. The Young Democrats of America just signed on. But when we released this, the DNC leadership was not very happy with us because they were hiding behind the concerns of some coal miners, and really it was specifically the concerns of not the miners themselves, but big corporations that want to hold on to a dying industry without really talking about the importance of a just transition. So, you know, Tom Perez may have been upset at us. We may have caused some good trouble, but once the genie is out of the bottle and it's supported by 150 organizations that are grounded by people power, you kind of can't put that back in the bottle. So because of that, when we approached the platform committee with our recommendations, they had no choice but to take us seriously. And what ultimately got placed in the platform were a number of wins. And I'm just going to run through the top lines, and I will also, after I'm done speaking, drop them in the chat. But they include a commitment that the US will do its fair share of greenhouse gas reductions to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is a significant amendment improving the 2016 platform, and also an improvement over the original 2020 draft. We It also includes language that for the first time commits to enabling renters to participate in the green economy and reduce their energy costs by incentivizing landlords to make energy efficiency and clean energy upgrades. It fights climate and science denialism through supporting environmental and climate literacy and reversing Trump's rollback on funding for the National Environmental Education Act. It eliminates tax breaks and subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. It bans new oil and gas permitting on public lands and waters, which is something that at the outset we thought was going to be a big lift, and it was a big lift to get it into the platform, but we got it into the platform. It invests in research and development to support green agriculture and climate resilient, sustainable, low carbon and organic farming. And finally, it holds polluters and executives accountable for hiding or distorting information that harms workers or communities. So we are not done yet. We're just getting started. And one of the ways in which we are just getting started is, and continuing the movement, is through local and state action. And I'm just going to very briefly talk about one example of that at the local level in the city of Berkeley. We have gotten a nearly unanimous city council. In fact, the only person who didn't vote for it was someone who ran against me for council last year. But so it was an 8-0-1 vote to pass Berkeley's, or to put on the ballot, Berkeley's Green New Deal. And what this would do, first of all, how this would get funded is through, taxes are never progressive. There is going to be a slight increase on the natural gas and electric portion of utility users tax by 2.5%. That's an average annual cost of $53 per year for customers. However, what we're really trying to do here is a push to get PG&E, which has lobbied the state very effectively so far, to keep taxing electric and natural gas portions of the user's tax at the same amounts. And this is going to begin the process. We put this on the ballot. Our neighboring city of Albany put the same thing on the ballot. We're going to be leaning on the California Energy Commission to lower the taxation of the electric portion over time. What this also does is it eliminates the utility user tax entirely on both gas and electricity for the nearly 5,000 low-income Berkeley residents who enroll in California's low-income programs. And that's a savings of an average of $160 per year, which is important at a time when costs are going up across the board and folks are having to decide between paying their rent or putting food on the table. That's $160 that can be better spent for all of these other purposes, although the rent is also too damn high, and we're working on that as well. But let me talk about, and this is the really exciting thing, is what is this going to fund? Because these changes would raise about $2.4 million a year. So it would create a panel of energy, equity, and climate experts, similar actually to the DNC Climate Task Force, but at the local level to advise the City Council on how to make equitable and effective climate action investments. It would also give the council the authority to later charge different tax rates on electricity, which we talked about. What this does, Berkeley previously made history by passing a climate action plan, a climate emergency declaration, and a fossil-free resolution. But these are important measures, but they're symbolic measures. Right now, we don't have enough funding to actualize these. This measure would actually begin to fund these kinds of projects and programs, the very projects and programs that would transition existing buildings to clean electricity. Berkeley was the first city in the nation to do a full gas ban for new buildings. And as we continue to electrify more buildings, new and existing construction, this is going to be important financing to do so. It would also expand clean transportation alternatives, such as shared electric vehicles. But EVs are controversial because not everyone can afford an EV or lacks the infrastructure to charge them. I'm a renter in a multifamily building that was built before EV charging was commonplace. So I would have to shell out a lot of money before I could transition to an EV. But so more importantly, this funds bicycle and pedestrian improvements. It also begins to invest money into public transit through an additional tax on transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft, for instance. And it also implements energy efficiency and resiliency measures for homes and businesses. So we're going to be working on this. It requires a simple majority vote. The Taxpayer Association and the Real Estate Lobby have made common cause to throw lots of money in opposition to this measure.
I bet they have.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you to Mark and everyone from our revolution for always being on the front lines of fighting money with people power. And the thing about Berkeley is people power has generally won, whether we've taken on Big Soda and gave them a bit of a shellacking that they didn't expect. We then took on the landlord lobby. And we were, there were two measures that they would suit us on that would make it easier for affordable housing to be financed in Berkeley through a modest increase in the tax on large landlords. They took us to court. They it was one of the most expensive campaigns, campaigns of misleading and confusion. To try to fight us on this. The ballot measure we put on still won by nearly 80%. And we are looking forward to having an overwhelming number of Berkeley, the people of Berkeley voters, once again, voting in support of this, despite the opposition, because the residents of Berkeley, like voters across the country, recognize that climate change is one of the most important, if not the most important, existential crisis of our time and needs to be addressed right away, yesterday. So thank you so much. It's such an honor to be part of this panel and be alongside of all of you fighting for climate justice.
Thank you, Igor, so much. And people power does win. But we need to have people at the front of that fight who are fighting against outdated infrastructure, outdated policies, outdated thinking. And thank you, Igor, for being at the forefront of the fight for the people. Igor, thank you so much. So we've been talking about every movement needs to educate, activate, and then implement. So now we're going to talk about that. So one of the examples of how to win the Green New Deal on the local level is part of our next discussion. The person that we're going to be talking to is the originator of the Bay Area Green New Deal. And the Bay Area Green New Deal is a sweeping, sprawling, comprehensive program comparable to Bernie Sanders, but it's not a federal program. It's aimed at counties and municipalities. This one's aimed at all 9 counties that surround the Bay here in Northern California. Our next interview subject is a noted environmental scientist. She is affiliated with the McGill University in Montreal. She was working on projects in the Great Lakes, but happily she's now with us in Northern California. I'm so used to seeing her on Zoom meetings, so this is going to be nothing for us. She is an organizer with Our Revolution Contra Costa, which is one of the co-hosts of this event, and also an organizer at the Sierra Club. And if you forgive me for a real quick second, I must tell this story. So back in February, before the California primary, where we were working so hard to make sure that Bernie won, this next speaker organized a town hall in East Contra Costa, a very conservative part of California. And it was done under the auspices of the Sierra Club. and it was to promote the Green New Deal, the federal Green New Deal. And so essentially, we had a town hall that was a Bernie rally, and Michael Bloomberg was picking up the bill. So that was rather delicious, I must say. With no further ado, this is the originator of the Bay Area Green New Deal. Please welcome Dr. Wietske Medema. Dr. Wietske, are you there?
Hey, Mark.
Hey, good to see you. Good to see you. So I'm going to make it broad and general. Dr. Wietske, what is the Green New Deal? What does it mean to you? And how did the Bay Area Green New Deal originate?
Well, to me, the Green New Deal represents my dream of a better world, one that I know is possible, and one that I would like to see manifest in my lifetime. I'm sure I'm not the only one here. The Green New Deal is unique because it connects environmental justice, social justice, and economic justice. And if we want to create a world that works for everyone, we must move away from more fragmented policy making, and the Green New Deal does exactly that. Like everyone here, I want to see a transformational change in our current system, and to achieve that, our environmental movements, our social movements, and labor movements, they must all work together. And we have to represent the needs of our most underrepresented and oppressed communities first. We have to make sure that we represent indigenous communities, Black and brown communities, all those communities that are most impacted by climate change and environmental, social, and economic injustice. So as progressives, we have to unite across the globe. This has to be a global effort, but it also has to start locally from the bottom up. So you asked me, when the idea of Bay Area Green New Deal originated. And the Green New Deal has gained popularity fast all over the world, but without the federal support for the Green New Deal that we would have had under Bernie, we have to tap into that excitement and build Green New Deal plans for our cities, for our states, and to fight the existing power system, which is very reluctant to transform the way we want it to. We have to build Green New Deal alliances all over the country from the bottom up. We have to tap the power of collective action and build local, intentionally organized networks that help us to continue to put pressure on these existing power structures. And this is one of the reasons why we decided, because this is not only my effort, it's a collective effort. But this is why we saw the importance of developing a Bay Area Green New Deal, for our communities. It's so important and it's so essential, and it's important that we do this everywhere.
So, and my next question is, and this is where activists get intimidated. It's about actually drafting policy. So tell us about the process for drafting the Bay Area Green New Deal.
Well, it's funny that you asked me this question, since you've had a large part to play as well in drafting the Bay Area Green New Deal. But for the sake of the event, I'll just pretend that I don't know you. So one of the helpful elements of this effort has been the existing local Bernie activist network. Our people are involved in many environmental and social organizations, and they're always keen to help. And not being from the area and not having lived here very long, it's been wonderful and amazing to connect with all these different activists all over the area, all over the region. And
Bernie people are the best people.
Yes, truly. To build enthusiasm and to continue to push for the Green New Deal in our area, we organize town halls, as you mentioned, initially in person. And then, once the pandemic started, we organized those online. We made sure to invite inspiring speakers. Some of them are part of tonight's panel, who bring their localized knowledge and expertise of key policy areas that are integral to the Green New Deal. And we discussed how these policy areas intersect and weave together. So it was a big learning process. And with the growing popularity of the Green New Deal, there are Green New Deal plans sprouting up literally all over the world, for cities, for states, for countries. And we basically studied a lot of these plans. And I strongly suggest for anyone else who's passionate about developing a local Green New Deal plan for their communities to do the same thing and to learn and to steal from these existing plans. I will make sure to provide a link in the chat for anyone who's interested to read our Bay Area Green New Deal. I'll do it actually right now.
Yes, and for anyone who, if you don't know if a local Green New Deal or a local Green Economic Recovery Act is happening in your district, that means you have to do it. So if no one else is doing it, you've got to do it. And please steal from the Bay Area Green New Deal. Whatever fits your district, just take it. We're not proprietorial. This is a democratic living document in the true sense of the term. Dr. Wietske, one last question. So where are we now with the Bay Area Green New Deal? How are we doing with building coalition? Tell us the status update.
Well, we're using the draft Bay Area Green New Deal as a local coalition building and organizing tool to bring communities and various stakeholder groups to the table and develop more scaled down versions for different counties and cities in the Bay Area. As you mentioned, we have 9 counties and each county has numerous cities. One of the things that we recently did, which was very exciting, is we developed a scaled down version of the Bay Area Green New Deal for one of our counties, Alameda County, with one of the local progressive candidates who is running for county supervisor for that county. And over the course of the conversations with him and with his staff, we collectively, emphasized the importance of framing a green deal for this county as a green economy and green jobs creation opportunity, especially in response to the pandemic and the immense loss of jobs across the state and the nation. So in collaboration with his candidates and his staff, we developed the Alameda County Green Economic Recovery Act. And I also included a link to that document so people can take a look at it as well. Both documents are still in draft, so they're living documents. We continue to improve them and strengthen them based on input and feedback of the communities. And, I think I wanted to stress that in a recent analysis that I read, top economists have shown how green and sustainable recovery policies offer powerful advantages in recovering the economy. And so we really developed the act to offer the most viable strategy for long-term economic recovery for Alameda County. After we've done that, we have had several candidates running for mayoral and city council positions who are also keen to look at the act and possibly sign on to it. And I think one of the things we'll be doing with a few environmental groups is for another county is to develop a city level plan that we want to approach each city with and ask them to adopt and sign on to this city level Green New Deal plan. So we are doing a lot of things and it's really exciting. It's kind of like growing on its own. And I wanted to, share with others that it's not difficult, it's exciting. And if anybody wants to do this for their own communities, I am very happy to share our experiences and help in whatever way I can. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people who have worked with me who would be willing to do the same thing. So yes, let's keep this going.
Let's keep this going. Dr. Wietske, thank you so much. Thank you so much for keeping this going and for starting the ball rolling. Really
Yes.
appreciate it.
You too.
Dr. Wietske Medema, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. So we're gonna hurry along. We have other speakers, very exciting speakers. The next person that we're gonna talk to, she's been working in the field of environmental sustainability for many years. She's worked with NASA, Alameda County. She's part of the Bay Area Recycling Coalition. And she is the author of this fine book called The Great Pivot, which I can assure you does not collect dust on my bookshelf. It's a very fine book. And to fellow Bernie-crats, the great power that we have is that we know what we want. And we are very good about public programs, about establishing and developing public programs. But there are other opportunities that sometimes we have a blind spot to in the philanthropic sector, even in the small business sector. And we can't let these be blind spots. And particularly when pushing something as large as the Green New Deal on the state level, on the local level, on the national level. So this is a very important conversation. I want you to all give a listen to the author of this book, Justine Burt. Justine, are you with us?
Yes. Hi, Mark. How are you tonight?
Not too bad. Not too bad. A little hot. Perspiring.
Are you hot? We should really do something about climate change.
Yes. Justine, I'm going to give the floor over to you. I think you have a presentation for us.
Okay. Do you want me to share my screen, my slides?
Please.
Okay. Okay. So when I published this book a year ago, I proposed creating millions of new green jobs because I was concerned about all the outsourcing that had happened, millions of jobs going overseas, all the automation that was just getting started that would destroy millions of jobs in the gig economy. And then in March, the bottom fell out of the economy. So it's interesting, whereas last year when my book came out, it would have been nice to create millions of green jobs. Now we really need to create millions of new jobs. And the green sector poses the most opportunities. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they really undercount when they tell you who's unemployed. So officially there are 11 million people aged 25 to 64 who are U3 unemployed. And that's just people who actively looked for work in the last 4 weeks. There's an entirely different category of not in the labor force. That's 39 million adults aged 25 to 64, people who applied for a few jobs last year, but nothing came through. People have given up looking. People working 8 hours a week could really like a full-time job with benefits, as well. It's this big catch-all category that also includes parents who are staying home with small children or caregivers taking care of elderly parents. But if you look at the two categories together, there are 51 million Americans, 25 to 64, potentially deployable to fix to bring the economy back. So I want to ask a question. Let's see, I wanted to ask a question because I want to give away one copy of my book. So feel free to type in the chat. Tell us how many Californians have filed for unemployment due to the coronavirus business shutdown since mid-March.
Oh, God.
Since mid-March, how many Californians have filed for unemployment due to coronavirus business shutdowns? Whoever gets closest to the right answer wins a copy of my book. And I'm gonna get any answers, any guesses? Anxiety. Okay, I see an answer. 10 million, 5 million, 3 million, 2 million, 7 million. Poll is closing in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Massimo is closest. It's 7.31 million. I will get your address later. I'll send you a copy. Thanks for playing. All right, 7 million Californians unemployed and looking for work. What kind of work could we deploy them to do? Well, we all know the Green New Deal talks about decarbonizing our energy system and our transportation system, but it's also important to talk about building a circular economy. China doesn't want our garbage anymore, and our recyclables are now being shipped to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. We could be recycling them here in the Bay Area, in the region. And mainly what we're sending overseas for recycling is paper, cardboard, and plastics. We should be reducing the amount of food wasted. Before COVID even started, we were throwing away 40% of all the food we raise and grow, 40%. And now it's so much worse with COVID because all of a sudden restaurants closed, hotels closed, casinos closed, schools closed. And I'm sure everybody's read about all the farmers who are plowing under lettuce and throwing away onions and dumping out milk and slaughtering hogs because the supply chain for food is not nimble enough to just ship it over to grocery stores instead. There's also a lot of work to restore nature, to make the forests healthier, to restore healthy waterways, to sequester carbon in the soil and give farmers an additional income stream, and to restore wildlife populations. We've lost 60% of all wildlife since 1970. There's a lot more we could be doing. So I want to give you some examples. There we go. I want to give you 11 examples of projects real quick. The ones with a green border are ones that have a return on investment. In California, every one of the 345 hospitals, every police station, every fire station, every K through 12 school should be a microgrid. It should have solar PV, energy storage, electric vehicle charging, energy efficiency, so that when the grid goes down, when PG&E turns off the power so that the winds that are blowing don't start a wildfire, that these organizations can still serve the community. They can cut themselves off from the grid and still serve the community. These all have returns on investment. Let's deploy the private sector, the private financial sector to invest in these, and then they get the return. For recycling, we could be recycling some of that plastic into reusable plastic pallets, which last 5 to 10 years instead of the stringer pine wooden pallets that we usually see that only last 3 to 5 trips before they need to be rebuilt. We're chopping down 14 million trees a year in the United States to make these wooden pallets. Plastic pallets with recycled content would last a lot longer. The slides with a blue border are nonprofits. So this is a picture of a Stanford student, and he and some friends were, well, all the students at Stanford were sent home early for COVID spring break. Just about the time they were hearing that farmers were plowing under and throwing away produce that they couldn't sell because restaurants and schools were closed. And he and his classmate raised some funds among their friends and family to go rent this truck, drive it up to Oregon, pick up 50,000 pounds of onions, and drive it to the Los Angeles Food Bank. They started a nonprofit, made the best of a bad situation, and felt really good about diverting food that would ordinarily be thrown away. There's so much like this. There's surplus food, and then there's ugly produce that could be diverted to the people who are currently food insecure. There's this great nonprofit called Kitchen Table Advisors, and what they do is they help the small organic startup farmers who know how to grow organic produce but may not understand the business aspect very well of what they're doing. And they help them set financial goals and then help them figure out marketing, distribution, accounting, all the things they need to do differently to reach their financial goals. With a lot more funding, they could help shift agriculture towards towards more organic farming, which is currently only about 1% of agriculture. We're all very concerned about all the plastics in the Pacific Ocean. 43% of all the plastics in the Pacific are lost in abandoned fishing nets. There's an Italian company called Aquafil, which looks for volunteer scuba divers in Washington State to come pull the lost and abandoned nets out, and then pays fishermen to bail them up. These bales are then shipped, they're nylon 6 plastic, they're then shipped to Slovenia where they're recycled into new textiles. With more funding, these nonprofits could do a lot more work like this to clean up the Pacific Ocean. The goldenrod border are local government projects. I'm sure many of you know City Berkeley since 1979 has had a tool lending library. People love it. You can borrow landscaping, woodworking, construction tools, and more recently kitchen tools. So you don't have to, everyone doesn't have to buy the same 100 tools that sit unused most of the time in your garage or your cabinets. There's a late fee after 3 to 7 days, but people love it. It's a real amenity for the community. I wish every city and town in California had a tool lending library. If all 482 towns had them and each hired 2 full-time people, that would be nearly 1,000 jobs right there. Building deconstruction is another opportunity. In 2016, the city of Portland was seeing hundreds of old Victorian houses demolished, smashed, pushed over into a 40 cubic yard dumpster and hauled to the landfill. And they hated to see all the solid oak wooden flooring, all the kitchen cabinets, all the wood banisters, the clawfoot tubs, the porcelain sinks thrown away. And so they said, you can't demolish houses anymore that were built before 1916. You have to deconstruct them. And as a result of that, they did a training for 14 people, a 3-day deconstruction training. And 2 of them were right out of prison, 7 were homeless. The rest had entry-level skills to train them for deconstruction. There's another opportunity to reduce our greenhouse gases by putting in more protected bike lanes. White stripes are nice, green stripes are nice, but half of Americans would like to bike more. They just don't feel comfortable sharing the road with drivers, many of whom are distracted. So if we can create some kind of barrier, like most major European cities do, some kind of barrier between the cyclists and the drivers, those 48% of all trips are 3 miles or less. 25% of all trips are 1 mile or less. And so having protected bike lanes and working on more of those, which the city leads, would help get people out of their cars for some of the trips. And then there's the state level. I'd like to see building electrification led by the state with funding, particularly for one area. And this is where the intersection of environmental justice, equity, and green comes into play. Low-income multifamily dwellings, if you make minimum wage and you're in an apartment, you're not going to spend $5,000 to upgrade the natural gas burning equipment in the apartment because it's not your building. And so, not to mention not having the funds, and the property owner doesn't pay the energy bill, so why would he or she pay for upgrades in these units? This is a picture of actually a friend's single family home where she's having people put in an electric water heater. There's so much opportunity to decarbonize our buildings and to create jobs in the process. Everyone's been hearing about reviving the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is a picture from the CCC in the 1940s. By 1942, the Civilian Conservation Corps had 3.4 million young men, it was all men, no women, aged 17 to 28, doing things like planting 3 billion trees and building roads and all kinds of things. We could be bringing this back. Lord knows we need healthier forests in California. And the last example has to do with restoring endangered species populations. The private sector is not going to build wildlife overpasses over highways connecting 2 habitats for endangered species, but government does. It tends to happen at the state level. This is a picture of a wolf in Yellowstone, and every winter, an additional $35 million is pumped into the economy around Yellowstone because people come from miles around with their binoculars and they line up in cars with the hope of seeing a wolf on a distant hillside. And they stay in hotels and they eat at restaurants and they buy souvenirs. If we did more to restore endangered species populations that could help encourage ecotourism in more rural areas. So I want to leave you with the last thought that in order to create green jobs, we need money. And the Green New Deal is great, but we don't have to wait for Congress to pass a Green New Deal. Green New Deals can happen at the state level. It can happen at the city level, at the regional level, like what Wietske is talking about. But we need government for two reasons. Government's how we come together to do things that we can't do separately. It's how we pool our resources for things in the public good. It's also the only organization that can levy fees on behavior we want to discourage, like burning fossil fuels, and then use the revenues to create green jobs. But again, we don't have to wait for only government to act on this. Meanwhile, there's something the private financial sector could be doing. Let's get shovel-ready projects ready for investors so they can see what, and do business plans so they can see the return on investment and realize, this is a better return on a project than some of my other projects. Let's do it. And the last thing I want to leave you with, the philanthropic sector is only required by the IRS to give away 5% of their endowment per year. If we ask them to double it, if they gave away 10% per year, that would be an additional $200 billion flowing into our economy that's desperately needed by the nonprofits. So let's encourage the philanthropic sector to step up and do more. The last thought I want to leave you with is that there was a report by 3 economists at the University of Chicago back in May that said 42% of the jobs that COVID destroyed are not coming back because of shifts in our economy. So while it would be nice to create millions of new green jobs, at this point we really need to. And that's what I have.
Justine, thank you so much for that. Always edifying and a lot to mull over. Thank you so much. And thank you for your invaluable input to the Bay Area Green New Deal. And you're always giving us new angles to contemplate. Sometimes we're a little government heavy in our thinking. We need to be thinking about all the sectors. Justine, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Our final speaker. You cannot talk about the Green New Deal without talking about the Sunrise Movement. I'm so excited to have, I'm always excited to hear this next speaker. For those who don't know, by chance, the Sunrise Movement is sort of the reason why we're talking about the Green New Deal today. The Sunrise Movement really gave the entire environmental movement in America a much needed reality check. And they've used tactics to force the conversation. And they've forced the conversation from elected officials about the Green New Deal. They are representative of a generation that is saying in one voice that we can't wait. Our next speaker is, he's tasked to tell us about the world that we are fighting for, what the world with the Green New Deal will look like. Please welcome Massimo Lambert-Mullen of the Sunrise Movement. Massimo.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really honored and humbled to be here amongst so many people who have fought so long for environmental justice, for social justice, against environmental racism, against the forces of capitalism that have come to really bring us to the place we are now with the climate crisis, and to be speaking on the same panel as such inspiring candidates. So I want to thank Fatima. We need more teachers in office. Teachers are the reason I'm here, why I've been inspired to become an activist. I started out doing work around the Palestinian liberation movement because of a teacher at my University of Humboldt State. I want to say I'm actually here in Arcata right now. I want to say I'm on Wiat land, and we should be very inspired by a recent development that happened here where the city of Eureka turned over Tuluwat, or Indian Island, which is a sacred island here in Humboldt County, back over to the Wiat tribe to be restored. And the work is already being done to heal that space of the atrocities that happened there 150 years ago, and to also clean that space up from the environmental atrocities that happened with the local lumber mills there. So yeah, just some rural perspectives there. I was gonna do a whole PowerPoint presentation, but I'm gonna just go heavy on poetry this time around. But first, yeah, I just want to thank, aside from Fatima, Jake, for being a young representative of our generation, fighting for housing justice in Silicon Valley, which is so important locally. I also want to thank Carol so much for running for Oakland City Council. I'm a former resident of West Oakland, and I am so inspired by you. I saw you speak on Juneteenth before we did the rally going to the Magnolia House, and you are an absolute inspiration. I'm so happy. So yeah, Oakland love. Want to thank Igor, especially for bringing up the DNC resolution. That was the moment where I got into Sunrise Movement, actually. That was the first event I attended. And despite the fact we didn't get exactly what we wanted, what I want to say about Sunrise is that we keep fighting and we keep pushing. And even though, AB 345 didn't pass, we're going to come out even stronger next year with even stronger legislation to limit fossil fuel production and completely end it in California, I hope. So yeah, I want to thank Wietske for inviting me to speak, and for all the hard work you've done on the Bay Area Green New Deal and representing underrepresented communities, respecting indigenous sovereignty. I want to thank Justine so much for your presentation, and I really look forward to reading your book. We'll get in touch after this. And I am one of the 7.2 million Californians who's been on unemployment since the pandemic. I lost a lot of work because of it, and that has helped me get by. And I look forward to continuing to push to make sure people can continue to stay in their homes, and that we don't have an unprecedented wave of homelessness like so many people are predicting. But like I said, I want to focus on poetry for the moment. So I'm going to recite some original poetry. Some of you may remember it from the last Green New Deal meeting. It's called Rainbow Ribbons. Fossil fuel is cancer. It runs beneath her skin, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep. From tar sands cuts to her cavernous stomach below, oil and gas are natural, harmless cells of Earth's body. Left alone, these cancers of ancient death are benign, but the agitating needles of fracking rigs and derricks catalyze their malignance. As these tumors are peeled from her body and released into the atmosphere, she begins to cough. Her golden brown skin is diagnosed with lymphoma, unable to support life in her follicles after decades of chemical fertilization. Her pancreas is rendered useless, allowing the sludge of mines and pools of oil to seep into the intestinal passages of shrinking aquifers. Her esophagus can no longer digest toxic waste, and as its burning tumors thicken within her throat, she can barely scream to protest on a cosmic operating table with no attending nurse. Her cervix can no longer bring life, and her voiceless children are slowly becoming extinct, choking on plastic and crude oil. It is not enough to wear rainbow ribbons, to slap Keep Tahoe blue stickers on bumpers. It is not enough to send our thoughts and prayers, to listen to a few Greta Thunberg speeches and take shorter showers. The only cure is our choice to harness the resources that she willingly provides. As she lies upon her earthen bed, we need to purify her smoke-laden breath, her poisoned waters, and fallow soil. It is our collective decision to bring medicine to her dried lips with the energy of the tides, bring fresh air to her lungs by harnessing winds, to cure her skin with sunlight. We must bring down the concrete dams that act as tumors in her breasts, making it impossible to feed fresh flowing rivers and nurse the young salmon. We cannot let her die, for we drink her milk and inhale as she exhales. We must nurse our mother. She must survive. So that's my first poem. I'm very inspired by poetry, and I'd like to share a quote by Alice Walker. Poetry is the lifeblood of rebellion, revolution, and the raising of consciousness. And personally, I share my poetry because of Sunrise Principle number 5. We have 9 principles that define our work. And Sunrise Principle number 5 is that we share our stories and that we are empowered by them. And so, yeah, in my imagination, a future with a Green New Deal is a future, on one hand, without PG&E, where we nationalize our electrical grid and we localize our electrical grids throughout the Bay Area, throughout California, and throughout the country. I see a future where unions see more and more people coming in, and that there truly is a just transition. I want to shout out to Steve Ongerth, who is an amazing labor leader. And one thing, he sent out an email recently and was talking about the Martinez refinery closing. And while that on one hand is a victory against fossil fuels, there is no just transition in place for those workers. And so we need to follow in the footsteps of what Colorado has done and create a just transition task force. And we need to take it even further in California, where we expedite the process. I was reading about it today, and they're not planning on really getting everything totally in place until 2024. This needs to happen in 2021 at the latest. So I want to see us learn from our neighbors. I want us to recognize that in the Bay Area, we are innovators. We will always be innovators, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of people throughout the country, throughout the state, like I mentioned here in Humboldt County, who are doing amazing work that we need to learn from as well. We need to make sure we're not developing buildings on shell mounds anymore as well, respecting indigenous sovereignty. To continue with the Principle 5 and sharing my story, I would like to keep it brief because I know everyone's tired, and I want to say I'm here because of my heroes. And some of you are here. Like I said, you know, Steve Ongerth has been an inspiration. Carol Fife is absolutely an inspiration. Wietske has been, you know, a wonderful mentor and an inspiration. And I've been inspired by the Black Panther Party, by people like Fred Hampton, who fought for a Rainbow Coalition and who died for it. I'm inspired by people like Judy Berry of Earth First, who fought for unions and environmentalists to come together as a union member herself, and fight to save the beautiful forests of the Mattole watershed. I want to say I'm inspired by my grandparents. Finally, my grandparents, George and Latane Lambert, who were union organizers in Texas back during the first New Deal. So I'm going to share with you a letter that I wrote to my grandfather, George Lambert. Next. All right. Forgive me if I get a little emotional. And thank you so much for all being here. Dear Grandpa George, it's been 82 years since you took the train to San Antonio to help organize the pecan shellers strike. You were my age, a socialist when that meant being a magnet for bullets and batons. Grandma Latane met you there, and you were married days later in front of a rally of striking workers. Back then, the New Deal was building dams and highways. Now we are taking down dams on the Klamath and pushing for high-speed rails across that country. Ain't that something? The world has changed, and I wish I could tell you it was all for the better, but that's not the case. Immigrants still fight for better jobs and human rights. The cops are still murdering Black, Latino, and Latinx and indigenous folks. Socialism is still a bad word in America. We are now dealing with a climate crisis. It disproportionately affects the same people you fought for, the poor, people of color, women, and working class families. Just like you, my generation fights because it is simply the decent thing, the right thing to do. I've been working with the Sunrise Movement. It's going to be an uphill battle, but you taught me that those are the only ones worth fighting. We're going to stop polluting our air with greenhouse gases, stop poisoning our waters with oil spills. We're going to close down the refineries that give the working poor asthma and cancer. We're going to make sure there is a just transition to wind and solar, and our union allies will be with us. You would love it. It's called the Green New Deal. It won't be easy to get there, but your lifelong dedication to justice gives me faith. You taught me not to compromise, not to give up, not to accept defeat or succumb to corporate interests. Hell, you fought so hard you were gone 2 decades before I arrived. I wish I'd had the chance to thank you. I hope I make you proud. Yeah, thank you so much. Like I said before, I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so excited. I'm gonna say to Carol Fife again, I'm so excited for Sunrise to endorse you and for us to get out and start campaigning. And I'm so excited to continue this fight for a Bay Area Green New Deal, for a California Green New Deal, for a national Green New Deal, and for a global Green New Deal. Yes. And yeah, that's all.
Massimo, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Massimo, Lambert-Mullen, everybody, we so appreciate you. We so appreciate you and your work with the Sunrise Movement. Thank you for those moving words. And thank you for giving tribute to everyone who came before us. You know, conservatives always say that they believe in traditions and heritage and continuity of heritage and whatever. But we on the left, we have our traditions as well. We have our heritage as well. The labor movement, the civil rights movement, women's suffrage, and all of us here are part of a tradition, part of another movement as well. Massimo, thank you for being a leader in that movement. Massimo name-checked someone, Steve Ungerth, who is part of Labor, co-founder of the IWW Environmental Caucus. He is with us now. If everyone would indulge me for 2 minutes, Steve, would you be willing to give us some pearls of wisdom about just transition and labor? This is the thing that we haven't talked about. Labor's achievements are hard won and hard fought for, and sometimes they can be a little suspicious of a progressive policy, big sweeping progressive policy. I'll turn over the floor for Steve for 2 minutes. Steve.
Well, thank you very much, and it's an honor and a privilege to speak before all of you tonight. There's a lot that could be said about just transition and what it is. I would refer you to the IWW Environmental Caucus site, which is ecology.iww.org, if you don't mind my plugging that, and go to the section that's called Green Unionism, and there's a subsection called Just Transition, and there's a lot of information about it there. But what I wanted to do tonight is to make an appeal, and that is, as you know, the Martinez refinery is laying off all of its workers because of the economic crisis and because of fossil fuel capitalism, which of course has overextended itself. And we're going to be asked to pick up the tab, where the bosses will, laugh all the way to the bank, but the workers and the communities will continue to get screwed. What we need to do in conjunction with the Green New Deal campaign is organize a movement to demand a Green New Deal task force or a just transition task force from the state of California, similar to the one that they're setting up in Colorado right now, that will come up with concrete just transition frameworks to address all of the transitions that we need to make to avert climate catastrophe, which will potentially negatively adversely affect the workers involved in the polluting industries. They're not responsible for the damage. They're just trying to make a living, and they deserve to have a job with dignity. And we need to make sure that if we can get it together to build the movement to demand this thing and get it passed, we also have to make sure that it gets staffed by people like us, like the workers who are affected, and not captured by the industry, because the Western States Petroleum Association and the other bosses will do everything they can to try and maintain the status quo. So I put my email in the chat. Hopefully the organizers will save that. You can hit me up, but there's a lot of people talking about this, but we really need to build the movement to make this happen. I am a union member myself. I work on the ferry in the Inland Boatmen's Union. I wrote the Green New Deal language that our Union International and its convention passed, and a just transition language as well. However, we do green jobs, we work on ferries, but we also have workers who work on tugs who escort those ships, and they deserve to have a good living and safe working conditions too. And if oil goes away, they need to make sure that they have a job or at least a living. So that's why this is so important. And I really appreciate being offered this chance to speak. And thank you all. And I just want to say you all are inspiring. Keep up the fight, and don't let the minor setbacks that we sometimes have discourage you, because this movement is building and it's building momentum, and we're going to win because we have to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, so much. And thank you everyone who has withstood the entire evening. People's Assembly, Bernie Kratz, progressives, we must win. We must win. Millions of people are counting on us. When I was in Iowa, there was a woman who had come all the way from Tennessee to volunteer for Bernie. And I said, wow, that's really impressive. Thank you so much for coming all this way to volunteer for the campaign. And she said, don't thank me. My life literally depends upon it. Millions of people are depending on us winning, us succeeding with this. So everybody, we have a world to win. A better world is possible. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it over back to Lauren. I'm sure that the organizers, the wonderful organizers here for the People's Assembly, have a little closing statement to make, I'm sure. I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for this incredible weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was incredible.
Lauren,
for being
I
here.
do see Alex's hand up.
Oh yeah, Alex.
Alex, did you? We know you're a climate champion. So did you have a question?
Or final remarks for? I know he's a very passionate climate activist. Maybe he stepped away. While we're waiting for him to come, I just want to let you know, if you could stay for just a few minutes, we have a special treat. Okay. Just a sec, let me say this, Alex, before people leave. We have a musician. He was the minstrel for 2 bans on fracking, successful initiatives in San Benito and Monterey County, Bill Hunter. One of the things I totally agree with Sunrise, which is that music and culture poetry is very important to movements. Woody Guthrie was very involved in the labor movement in the past, and Pete Seeger. So in the tradition of Pete Seeger, Bill is going to sing a song that he wrote himself. We were told that we have to have original songs, otherwise, since we're live streaming, we'll get in trouble. Okay, so go ahead, Alex. Do you want to make a statement? And then we're going to go to Bill Hunter. And I put a link in there for the song, because Bill is like Pete Seeger. He wants you to sing along with him.
Okay, sounds right. Can you share my screen?
We can make you a host.
Thank you so much. Okay, share screen. So this is the projections, one of the projections on about what's going to happen. And, I wish that everyone who had any policy could give some prediction of what's going to happen in 2040. Are we in a 1.5C world? Are we in a 2C world? Are we in a 4C world? Are we in a 6C world? And Bill McKibben wrote an article about a week or 2 ago called 130 Degrees, which I will just show you on my screen for 1 second. And it describes that basically the human race is like a Homer Simpson busting through a gate of 1.5 C, which propels us to a gate of 2 C, which then propels us to a gate of 3, 4, 6, and ultimately extinction. And that makes me ask about, in our own movement, we're infiltrated. We're talking about a $40 trillion investment in the Pentagon and the CIA since 1960. They know how to blackmail us. They know how to psychologically manipulate us. So we are infiltrated. And which of us is a traitor? So it's a terrible thing to talk about. And what is the ultimate act of treason when we only have 19 years left? It's to waste our time. So even though most people waste our time are well-intentioned, we don't have any time left. And I think Igor and Mark would agree with that assumption. And basically, the Bernie movement and people like us all over the world, we are the lawyers. We're the last stand for every innocent creature in the world, every wide-eyed animal, every bird, every mammal, every fish that are all up against a wall and in danger of their obliteration by 2020. And that's really, you know, what my own prayer is that we can have an international website that describes what's the percentage chance that we'll be at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 8 degrees C by 2040. And this gets to, you know, my own belief. Well, to presage that, I'll get off of your mic here in a moment. We really should think in terms of wet bulb events. So a wet bulb event is basically when you have a high humidity and 130 degrees Fahrenheit condition. So in the next 5 years, we have to be prepared for losses of up to 1 million people in single fell swoops. So things are extremely serious. The media has no motivation to explain to us what's going on. And a 10-year delay, which is what I would interpret the overall Biden plan to be, will mean a 10 to 100 times greater extinction event than if we act now. So I want to just sort of make us realize that we are the last line of defense for millions of years of evolution, and we must give our all for nature and the human race.
Thank you.
And I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Thank you for your passion that keeps and continues to inspire us.
I think we really need the next song now. I mean, I think you're right, Alex, but I think we need a little inspiration. So do you want to do your song now, Bill? Are you there? Let me see, do you need to be unmuted?
Let me ask Alex to please stop sharing his screen.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Alex, for all the great info you always provide to our delegates. Okay, Bill, you want to take it away? I want to let people know I posted Bill's, the link to his lyrics there, so you can download it. It's on the Google Drive, it's shared, but I'm going to copy some of the lyrics here. So just so you can, he likes to do a sing-along, so in the tradition of Pete Seeger. So go ahead, Bill, and happy birthday. Today's Bill's birthday, too.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy and Mary. They're really the ones that got me involved. The first time I got involved in anything like this, it was the anti-fracking measures in San Benito and Monterey County. But I've been a big fan of Pete Seeger's for quite some time. So anyway, the chorus, if anybody feels like singing along, that'd be lovely. Alone we are like raindrops, raindrops falling from the sky. Alone we can be like snowflakes, raindrops trying to fly. But together we can be a raging river. I say together we can be an angry sea. Together we can move mountains. Together when we believe. Now stand up, be counted. Stand up, you can right a wrong. Stand up when the odds are stacked against you. Stand up and let them hear you sing your song. Alone we are like raindrops, raindrops falling from the sky. Alone we can be like snowflakes, raindrops trying to fly. But together we can be a raging river. I say together we can be an angry sea. Together we can move mountains. Together when we believe. Now let these songs we sing be for freedom. Let these songs we sing be of love. Let these songs we sing unite us as seas of change raining from above. Alone we are like raindrops, raindrops falling from the sky. Alone we can be like snowflakes, raindrops trying to fly. But together we can be a raging river. I say together we can be an angry sea. Together we can move mountains. Together when we believe. I say together we can move these mountains. Together when we believe.